Hi folks, Rob Flux here for another Sunday session. Today's topic is negotiation do's and don'ts, and we've got professional negotiator Scott Aggett coming in from Hello Haus. So I'm going to quickly welcome Scott into the room. So mate, welcome aboard.
G'day Rob, thanks for having me.
That's okay mate, Sunday afternoon. I note that you are a little better prepared than I am. I'm still hydrating from last night. So what flavour beer you got there, mate?
It is a craft beer, all killer, no filler, vanilla pale ale. I'm a craft beer guy.
Not endorsed, but proudly supported.
Exactly.
Mate, welcome aboard. Professional negotiator. Let's talk a little bit about your background first. You've got over 25 years in, I guess, the property industry, which gives you a little bit of experience, I guess, in this space. Tell our people who haven't heard of you, I guess, what you have done over the years and why you're the man to be talking to today.
Sure. Okay. Well, I guess if we start from the start, my school work experience was as a real estate agent. So from age 15, I think it was in the blood. Mum and Dad tried their hand at doing a subdivision and some duplexes, I think, when I was a little kid. So I have fond memories of that, even though I think it was a bit of a fail and that stopped them in their tracks. But yeah, I had a love affair with property from an early age. It's straight after school, I did the real estate course for a year, and then that's it. I was just in my blood and did 5 years in London, 3 years in Sydney, working as an agent. Then when I came back from London, I worked for Bell Property. I set up the first 3 franchises of Bell Property in Sydney's eastern suburbs. So I was the principal and the lead selling agent there. And then hated being a real estate agent for probably the last 6 to 8 years. The whole time I had this vision in my mind of how it could be done better, be more transparent. I had this business idea of, and I guess it was probably selfish as well because I just loved negotiating, but I didn't love, canvassing for new business and doing these things. So I wanted to create a business around negotiation and around my lifestyle. So got out of real estate, had 3 years off, set up a little boutique ski lodge business as a passion project with a mate of mine from Sydney in Japan. So been flipping hotels in Japan, which has been good fun. Not a lot of money in that, as it turns out, but it's a good laugh. And then got back into a situation where I wanted to develop myself and learn how to do it. So we moved to the Gold Coast 5 years ago. I think we're on to house number 7 in the 5 years that we've been here. I've just bought another house, which is a subdivision site at Nobby's Beach, which I'm going to build 2 luxury homes on. So yeah, I'm moving more in that direction of negotiating full-time nationally for clients, doing agent selection as well. So helping clients that are looking to sell their property and matching them with the right agent. Yeah, and then doing the development stuff, which is the fun bit for me. Is that a good wrap?
Yeah. So I guess, who are the kind of people that actually, I guess the type of client that actually engage a professional negotiator? Is it just the buyer, or is it somebody who's trying to sell as well?
It's both. The agent selection side of it is something I always did while I was an agent over my career, and probably a lot of agents do that for their family and friends, is help them sell out of area with it and choose the particular agent. So that's not a new service, and it's obviously been widely marketed by other sort of big businesses that are trying to run these models. But when you unwind all that, you'll find that people are paying for those leads, agents are paying for those leads. The type of businesses like Rate My Agent is called Fake My Agent within the industry, because you can't leave a bad review. It's a review site that you can't leave a bad review on, so everyone comes up smelling like roses. So that's one part of it. But in terms of the negotiation part for buyers, I guess to make it really simple, what I do, only 2% of Australians currently use a buyer's agent or external help to purchase, which means 98% of Australians believe they can go it alone, or don't know what the alternative is, or can't afford to outsource to a professional. So I build a business that's focused on that 98%, and it's a low cost, high turnover, high volume business. So all I'm doing is just negotiating. I don't see any property. I don't meet any clients. This is my staff uniform, t-shirt and shorts, normally boardies at home with the kids running nuts. So yeah, it's really that kind of business where I'm just in and out of those deals. And then the agent selection side where I help people sell. And typically that client for me is, I do principal place of residence, but it's mainly investors. And right now there's a real trend, Rob, that I'm seeing where it's mainly investors selling dud investments that they've had in regional areas of Australia, and they're cashing out of those investments and looking to reinvest in places that are going to grow at a faster pace. So that's kind of my job in a nutshell.
Yeah, very, very good, mate. So now our community is, I guess, novice part-time and semi-professional property developers. I would anticipate that, I guess, what we look for in a deal is going to be very different to your standard everyday investor type market. We tend to like getting off-market deals, whereas I'm anticipating that you're doing a lot of relationships with agents. What are the pros and cons of each one, mate?
Well, I mean, 40% of properties supposedly sell off the market. So, I'm trying to coach my end user clients, whether they're investors or principal place of residence buyers that are paying, I guess you'd call it retail rather than your group that are hoping to pay wholesale, if we break it down like that. So I'm trying to coach those customers into finding these opportunities at a much earlier stage, because competition is killer, as we all know. If you talk about just a standard sort of 4-week auction campaign, which we're all used to in Australia, the difference, Ray White have done some stats nationally on this year, the difference between the highest pre-auction offer versus the sale price under hammer was plus 11.4% and rising to, I think later this year, it's been plus 13%. Well, I can tell you that at the coalface, some of those times it's been 20, 30, 35% more than where they may have got pre-auction. So it's definitely about trying to find these properties at an earlier stage. And I think probably my mentality is more in line with your community, Rob, because I'm constantly looking for those opportunities. And I've got now a lot of investors that are coming to me and saying, okay, look, I'm basing these numbers around buying this property based on a very detailed FISO. We're looking to get in and get out quickly. We need this level of margin. So it works for me at this level or it doesn't. And that is really good for me because it's got a clear parameters of where we can have fun at. And beyond that, it doesn't work and we jog on to the next one.
But typically the client that engages you has already determined this is the property I want, and it's then just trying to negotiate on a one-on-one, as opposed to a buyer's agent who would actually go out and try to farm and try to find the opportunity themselves. So you're kind of honing in on the one deal.
Yeah, correct. So there's over 5,000 buyers and agents in Australia, and there's one expert property negotiator that has this niche business at the end. So they're going after the 2%, and I'm solo going after the 98%, hopefully. So that was a deliberate strategy, right or wrong.
I'm hoping the business is booming then, mate.
Business is good, yeah.
But based on what you're, I guess, as a professional negotiator, I'm anticipating that building rapport either directly with the agent or directly with the vendor is super, super important.
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that you do to try and help to build that rapport when you've never engaged with that person ever before?
Yeah, so I'll get people at different stages because they meet me through things like this, and they'll come to me and say, great, we want to use you, but we're just starting that process, or we haven't got finance yet, whether they're developers or whether they're investors or owner occupiers. And I coach all of those clients to find those opportunities off market or pre-market. And Rob, I reckon off market is one of Australia's biggest real estate furphies. Like, you'll see buyers agents non-stop tell you that they buy off market, but there is great buying off market, and really good buyers agents can do a great job of that and add a lot of value there. So I'm not poo-pooing buyers agents in general, but the whole strategy of saying that you buy off market, therefore you're better than someone else, is something that I can punch holes through reasonably easily, having sat in the agent seat and also doing the job that I do. Because by very nature of buying off market, in most of those instances, the vendor has basically made the decision and said, okay, well, I'm determining that if I accept your offer, Rob, that there is no way if I take this to market and I spend a marketing campaign and throw out a wide net, that I can beat that offer. So you're effectively, you might sure be buying it off market, but you're probably overpaying, or by very nature paying an absolute premium to have that opportunity. So it's about finding those opportunities, but not overpaying for that luxury. So the way to do that for me is to stay top of mind with agents, because you're getting properties where they're dealing with a motivated seller. They're dealing with someone that they've put their hand up already and say, okay, we're going to go to market. It might not be the right timing to go this week or next week. It might be Easter or Christmas holidays, and we definitely come back and sell in February, for example. So they know they've got those agency agreements signed or someone in their pocket ready to go in the coming weeks or months. So it's about finding those opportunities, plus any other private sellers that you can unearth as well in your own database or your own chasing up. And the way to do that is really simple for me. I get my clients to build a simple 5 to 7 dot point email, which is sent BCC weekly without fail to the top 10, 20, 30, however many agents are active in your core market. And the crucial thing to getting opportunities off market and pre-market is to really laser focus to a particular zone. And I like to coach my clients that it's no more than 1 to 2 suburbs, because beyond that, no one's an expert. Even an agent it's really difficult if I was trading in Surrey Hills or Potts Point non-stop to know what was going on in Paddington all the time, even though it was next to me. So it's really hard because there's so many transactions, as we said, roughly 40% off market, that unless you're seeing all those, you can't be across the board in terms of market value. So get that BCC email, you put it together with all the agents' emails address, which are easy to get. You put in my 5 to 7 might be Scott Aggett, Mermaid Beach, finance approved to 2 million, minimum 405 square metre block, east of the easement, knockdown. So really straightforward. I know those properties exist. I'm not looking for a unicorn, because if you're going to do that, you're just going to make the job impossible. So if you can narrow your search down to what you're looking for and be very specific, hit that weekly. And then the trick is, Rob, is getting there straight away. If an agent rings you and says, okay, Rob, we've got an opportunity here for you and I can get you through at 3 o'clock this afternoon. You can't say, oh, mate, I'm in Bali. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm working on my tan, or I'm busy doing something else. Don't ring me. Or you go through and you make the effort. And then what most buyers do is it's not of interest to them and they never ring back. So the agent calls you and says, Rob, Monday morning, got you through 13 Smith Street. What do you think of it? And they need to know this because they want to convey that information to the vendor. So you've got to help them do the job. Most buyers ignore the call or just give them shitty feedback that's not going to really help them do their job. So anyone that has gone through and made the effort, you've got to follow up and give them really clear and concise feedback, because that's going to help you get the next opportunity and for them to know that you're legit and you're a real buyer.
And that's fantastic feedback, mate, because like you said, a lot of people do just ignore the call, and they might be ignoring this one opportunity, but they're closing the door on all the future opportunities by building that rapport with that agent.
Exactly.
And very false economies. And I have to 1,000% reinforce what you said with narrowing it down to 1 or 2 suburbs. We teach our guys no more than 3 suburbs maximum. So one council is one set of rules, because no matter what strategy you choose, there's 537 councils, 537 different sets of rules. Then you narrow that down to 3 suburbs to really hone in on. So, you know, everything you're saying is 1,000% in alignment with what we do.
And it's different with developing, as you know, because you within a certain core market, say 1 to 2 suburbs, there's not going to be that many opportunities with the right zoning, corner sites, or whatever you're looking for specifically. So I get it that you need to broaden your horizon, but for the general buyer, it is just really getting that laser focus down. Otherwise, it's time consuming, and you can't hit all those opportunities. You'll miss stuff.
Yeah. So I guess we find an opportunity, we find a site, we engage with the agent, and then we, start the negotiation process. It's not just lob a price over the fence and go, here we are. Usually a buyer wants to undersell and the seller wants to oversell, and there's a huge gap in the middle. How do we start to bridge the gap?
Yeah, well, you're going to see more and more of that in the market, I think, now, because there's going to be more supply coming to the market. You're already seeing the media reports that the vendors are pricing themselves in certain areas out of the market, so more properties will pass in. You're going to get to a position now where there's going to be auctions where it'll stop under hammer and it'll become a one-on-one negotiation because the vendor's nowhere near where the peak of the market is. So this is going to become more and more relevant as time goes on. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, this is the challenge for everybody. And of course, I've done probably north of 3,000 property deals. So I get a really good feel quickly when I'm liaising with an agent where I need to be. But there's certain things that I've learned over the years that are good little cheat sheets. And there's certainly some easy takeaways that you can do that. I'll work through a couple of them. But one of them for me is if you're trying to get an agent guide price, let's say it's offers over 1.5 million, and you know what it's like. Most times that means 2 million bucks in some markets, or it could be 1.6 million in another market. It's very difficult. So I'll ring those properties, those agents, and I'll just say, listen, I'm in that kind of 1.6 to 1.65 mark. And I'll just loosely throw out a number, and it's a different number every time depending on the property. And I'll say, am I wasting my time on this one, or is it worth me coming along and showing some interest? Because I'm super busy, you're super busy. Appreciate everyone's time poor. And most of the time, an agent will say to me, yep, you're wasting your time. We've already knocked back 1.67. You need to be north of that. Even though they're quoting 1.5, they just haven't told everybody. They haven't moved the goalpost. So if I go straight for the heart and ask that question, often they'll tell me that, or they'll say, no, you're not wasting your time. Come along and have a look at it. So ask very specific, direct questions, and very often you'll get a direct answer back. So that's one part of it. In terms of making an offer, I've worked out over the years, and especially in a rising market, because I've been through lots of rising markets, even though this is definitely the strongest one we've ever seen. that my first offer probably does 95 to 97% of the heavy lifting in terms of closing the deal for me. So I'll ask a series of qualifying questions to work out where the seller is. So I do a first call and I'll say, what's the ideal scenario for the seller? Forget price, but do you want, 30-day settlement, all cash, a lease back? What are you looking for? And they'll feed me all those answers. And then I'll basically go away and I'll ask them at that point as well, what will the owner take? What's the owner looking to achieve? Very often they'll tell me the specific number that I need to hit. If not, then I'll work out myself where I see value. So then I go back to the second stage. And when I put my first offer in, I've got all the answers, right? So I just feed those answers back, recircled in an email that's going to suit the vendor. So I've removed all the speed humps. But the trick is most buyers will go in and say, I'll go in at 90% and see if I can steal it. But it's not going to happen in this market, right? You'll know when you've got those opportunities. You'll know you're dealing with an uneducated agent, an out-of-area agent, someone that's in a hurry to sell it, an unethical agent. You'll get a gut feel of it because you're talking to educated people here that have bought and sold property before. But on the whole, you're better off to go 95, 97% of the way there to where you feel like your number is, your line in the sand, your target price, because that's either going to buy the property first up and limit the competition that you've got, or my role in that situation, my goal is to get a counter offer from the vendor. So if it's not enough to buy it, it's close enough that it generates a counter, and then it's a negotiation, right? I rarely go to the second number, the one they give me, then I just start to chip away at the gap. So that's one thing. You make your offer and much closer to the finish line than most people are pretty comfortable, because I think that lands a lot more properties at the right price. Second thing is, and this is one that you've probably not heard before, but this has been honed again out of a lot of work over the last couple of years with Hello Haus, is that I make my first offer by SMS. And I do it for a really key reason, okay? Because if I make an offer on SMS and it's not enough, if it's too low, they'll just dismiss it. They'll just say, no, thanks, not enough, bye-bye. We're just continuing to auction, or, we're going to do the open for inspection this Saturday or whatever it might be. But if the agent says to me, put it in writing, then I know I'm either going to buy it with that number, or he's going to use it or she's going to use it as a conditioning tool on the vendor based on the fact that it's probably at a level that they told the vendor initially to expect that market value was going to be at, or they've established over the time that it's been on the market that they're not going to beat that price. So they're going to use that to bash down the vendor and say, you need to take 1.67 from this guy because it's as good as you're going to get. And of course, I pre-frame that with, these are the reasons why I'm doing this. This is why it's worth X. And the biggest trick of this that buyers mostly forget is that they talk about budget. And you've got to get rid of budget and talk about value. And if you can do those things, change those words around, it'll go a huge way to landing the property.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a mouthful, but
no, very good mouthful, and a lot of really key points in there. One that you touched on, I guess at the start of that, was more talking to the vendor's needs as opposed to the vendor's wants. So the terms that they're looking for. So, are they in a hurry? Have they bought the next place? What are their circumstances for selling? Which can quite often create, I guess, a lot of flexibility in the offer you can put forward, because sometimes they haven't bought the next place and they need time. So sometimes price isn't the driving force.
Yeah, I had one today. I just bought a property about 2 hours ago for a client in Redcliffe, and they gave me a target price of 705,000. I ring the agent. The agent says, we've got interest in the very high sixes at about 690, but it's not enough. The vendor wants more. So I asked those series of questions. She told me exactly that situation that you just referred to and said, well, the vendor wants to sell it with a short settlement and then a lease back and all the rest of it. So I asked all these questions, and then I just gave them a flexible offer. I said, okay, well, based on that, we're prepared to go to 690, all cash. We'll settle in 28 days, and you can have whatever you want. So just work out whatever you want and come back. And she ended up coming back and just saying, actually, no, the vendor's just happy to take that with 28 days in vacant possession. So we got what my client wanted. We saved them $15,000, and it was done in 2 phone calls. So, it's just that repackaging up those answers and making it as clean as possible, and it was an easy close.
Yeah, and the second part to what you said there was, once you've captured those needs, you're playing that back to them in an email to say, look, what I heard you say was this, and this is why my offer allows you to actually achieve that actual goal and outcome.
SMS, Rob, SMS.
SMS. I can't say I've tried the SMS approach. And I know you touched on the reason, but why do you find that so powerful?
Because they write back instantly and they just say no, or whatever it might be, rather than giving you a huge explanation. You just get a instant cut through of, no, it's not enough. But if they ask you to put it in writing, because you've already done it on email, and it's the same outcome really, but I just find with SMS, I get more direct responses. Email, you get kind of more formal responses, and they give you all the BS about, we've got other interest in the house and we're going to keep showing on, like blah, 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 blah. SMS is like, no, not enough, or put it in writing. And then I know, gun, I'm in. Yeah, or I've got half a sniff and off we go.
So I guess what I've found in going into a negotiation is that whenever an agent is involved, it's not a two-way negotiation. It's actually a three-way negotiation. You need to, I guess, keep the agent happy because, that agent needs to put food on their table and fuel in the car and that sort of thing. And quite often an agent might be steering the terms of the deal a little bit more than the vendor might be. So what do you find are ways to kind of cut through the agent, I guess, being the handbrake in that instance?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's probably not food on the table with agents. It's probably petrol in the premium unleaded in the Lambo, Rob, at the moment, isn't it, for the agents? Yeah, I don't know that much food on the table. Well, I mean, you touched on it before in terms of you've got to. I talk to the agents with respect. The agents that deserve that. Some of them are just hard work, and I'll be a little bit more direct and to the point. But on the whole, if you're dealing with good agents are highly high-level communicators. They're good talkers. If you engage them and you give them real feedback and you've done all those other steps in terms of communicating to them the whole way along, then it's normally a pretty easy transaction for me to deal with those people. But sometimes you need to work out, what their objective is. Are they using your offer to position it at a certain level, and they're going to disclose that and invite more parties to bid against you? So I think it's all back to asking questions, right? Like understanding to eliminate. I'll go back at the step to eliminate the agent being a handbrake in that process. I understand more about the game that agent wants to play in each particular sale, because it varies every day for me with agents across the country, and understand how they're going to play the game, the speed at which it's going to be played, and then I play to those rules, right? So I build my strategy around that. And I'll give you some examples. Like very often I end up in a sealed bid scenario or a multi-offer scenario, and they'll say, okay, well, it's closing at 12 o'clock on Monday and you've got to have your best and final offer there. Obviously, that's very difficult for me to save a client money when it's just blindly put your offer in an envelope or on an email, and whoever's the highest is going to win. But the way that I win a lot of these is understanding how the agent's going to play it, right? So it's not just a little trick of ending on an odd number, $500,001, which I've won so many by $1 or $1,100 or whatever it might be. That's a really simple, silly one. But beyond that, it's understanding that, okay, well, hang on, he's going to or she's going to run this process at 12 o'clock that they're not actually going to sell. They're just going to see who the highest offer is. And then they're going to workshop it and go ping pong with everybody back and forth. So what's the point of putting your higher offer on the table at 12 o'clock? Like, you just want to put your hand up so you're in the mix. Other times, and you need to know this, is that it's an absolute best and final at 12 o'clock, and the owner is going to sell at 1 minute past 12. The contracts are going to be signed, that scenario. And that happens all the time as well. But I get a lot of clients that will ring me and say, this agent's a dick. They didn't, I told them I was interested. They never called me back. They sold it without me. But when I ring the agents and say, what happened? They said, well, I told them, like, we've got another offer on the table. If we hit the number that that the vendor wants, we're selling. They told me they're interested, but where were they? Or I told them they had to have an offer by Monday that was unconditional. They didn't. So, you got to ask the questions. You can't just play it at your own speed and hope these things, land in your lap. So I think that's a lot to do with when the agent's the handbrake. But sometimes I come up with scenarios where agents aren't you don't feel like an agent has put the offer forward to the vendor. So I'll drill them on whether they have done that, make sure I've got it in writing on SMS. I do little tricks like that just to kind of cover tracks. And occasionally, I just did one recently, a big deal actually for nearly $7 million in Wallara for a client. And we just couldn't get hold of the agent for nearly 2 days. He just wouldn't return my calls. And I knew he was just playing a game with me to drag me out because he wanted to create competition against us, and he wanted to see me desperately try to increase the price to buy it. But I didn't, and it went for nearly a day and a half. And then I rang the solicitor acting for the vendor, and I said, the guy's not, doing his job. You've employed him to answer the phone. I'm trying to buy this property. If you don't get on the phone to us and sort it out, we're just going to jog on. We really want to buy your property. We're not threatening to buy another one, but we're just going to jog on because the guy's a tool. And the solicitor rang the owner, and the owner rang straight back and said, "We're so sorry, we'll sort it out. What do you want to do?" And then all of a sudden, of course, the agent's on the phone 2 seconds later with his tail between his leg, wanting to do a deal because he's been told off by the vendor, which he's charging 120 grand for, 140 grand for. So yeah, there is ways to circumnavigate these things if you know how the process works.
Yeah. I mean, and you touched on, I guess, keeping pace with how the negotiations are going, but sometimes being too fast, speed can actually kill your negotiations. I found that you need to have some form of tussle for people to feel that there's value in a transaction. If you hit the price point they want straight away, they feel like they've been shortchanged and that they could have asked for more. But if you go through a back and forth and they feel like they worked to get the exact same price, it kind of they feel a little bit more satisfied that they squeezed every last drop out of you.
Yeah, sometimes I agree with you. Yeah, sometimes you've got to have a kind of a tussle in your words to kind of make it more real. But then I've just got so many examples of when just asking the question up front and then just going straight to the answer and just wrapping it up. Like I bought on Tuesday in just north of Southport for a client. I've missed out for her probably 5 houses, one after another. They all sold for about 100 grand more than where she was setting her target price. One came up on Monday or Saturday. She saw it, sorry, and I bought it on Tuesday, but came up on Saturday, and she saw it straight away and set me a target price of 630,000. It was on at 580. It was a private seller, and I rang the private seller and said, "Okay, great, I'm representing so-and-so. She really likes your house. She's really interested in buying it. What are you hoping to achieve? Timing-wise, price-wise?" And she told me about, timing-wise, just wants a short settlement. And she said, "Well, its offers over 580. I'm really hoping to achieve at least 580. And I said, "Okay, great. So you'd sell today if I gave you 580,000. I'm not saying my buyer's at that level. I already knew she was at 630, but that's the bit where I made it hard. So I always hang up and pretend that I'm going back to drag them up to 580. Called her back 2 seconds later and said, "Great news, we'll pay 580 done." And my client saved $50,000 in one phone call. So it's if you ask that question, sometimes you don't need to have the huge tussle, but it depends who you're dealing with. I think it's all in how you pre-frame it, and I work really quickly. So I'll tell the buyers that I work with that if you walk out of a property at an open for inspection on a Saturday, call me before you get to your car. That fast, because I know that someone in the open for inspection will put a hand up and say, "We really want to buy it. Come back and see my house after this. We're just around the corner. We want to sell." And then the agent's in that, wound up in that deal with the other buyer, that you've just got to get there really quickly and say, hang on, we want to buy it as well. Here's the competition. And then we get through our due diligence really quick. And I communicate the whole time where we're at. And, I move mountains to make sure we get there in faster than anyone else can. So I think you can do it pretty quickly, but you've got to really tell them why you're doing it. And often that comes back. This is another rabbit hole we probably don't want to go down right now, but when I offer, very often, not always, but very often, I've got leverage, right? And that's what forces the short time frame, because I'll say to them, I'll tell the buyer, look, at the open home, if you find something that you like, just drop casually into the conversation with the agent that, look, we really like this house, we're seriously interested. We are a long way down the line with another property off market that we're already under offer on. We really love this, so we're going to go away and do our research really quickly and come back and talk to you. And then I'll call up and say, they love your house, they really want to buy it. I think they told you, or they mentioned to you on Saturday that I'm already under offer for them down the road at another house off market. Look, it's not us putting the pressure on you, it's them, the other vendor. The agent's telling us if we don't exchange contracts by close of business on Wednesday, they're going to put it on the market openly on realestate.com. In this market, we don't want to lose that opportunity. These guys are really keen buyers, great buyers. They love your house. Yours is the preference, and it's really key that you pre-frame that, because otherwise agents think that you're just playing them off against each other. Yours is the preference, so we're going to go ahead and give you our best and final offer. But of course, as I said, it's not us, but we've got to get it done by close of business tomorrow afternoon or lunchtime tomorrow, and I hope you understand. If your vendors don't accept it, no problems whatsoever, we'll go buy the other house. It's better than going in there and saying, you've got to do it by midday tomorrow, otherwise we're out. And agents just go, F off, join the queue. Yeah. So that's honestly, if a buyer said that to me when I was an agent, I would just go out of my way to sell to someone else. Yeah, it's just because it's like a red flag red rag, I should say, to a bull. Yep.
Mate, what are some other do's and don'ts at open homes? So, like you mentioned, like giving you a call like before you get to the car. What other little tips and tricks can you say at an open home?
A lot of buyers will ask how many contracts are out, and that's just a stupid question if you can avoid that, because an agent is just trained to sell back to buyers that, we've got 3 or 4 people that have got contracts or interest. It's not a high number, it's not a low number, it's creating competition against you, so you've got fear of loss, but it's not over pushing it that you're scared and you say this is too hard, there's 15 contracts out. So that's one thing. A lot of buyers will make that mistake. The other thing is, of course, don't go through there and with a red dot on your forehead saying, oh my god, this is the best house I've ever seen. So many people have done that to me over the years, and then you just get your laser gun out, go bang, there's my buyer, and they're going to pay an emotional premium, which is great. So be subtle about it, be direct and really clear to the agent about it, and put your hand up and say, we're really interested in this property, we're seriously interested in buying it, we've got to get through our research and we'll come back to you, so please don't sell it without including us in any conversation. So you can definitely do that. I think you want to ask as well a really direct question that I think is very powerful, and a lot of the times it'll do a lot of heavy lifting for you, and that's to go for the throat when you're talking to the agent and say, rather than say how many contracts you've got out, ask them, what's the highest offer you've rejected, and then shut up. Yeah. Because you'll see really quickly how they unwind and try and bullshit and lie, or if they just give you a straight answer like that. And a good agent can just go like that and still lie to you, and you've got to be able to, take that for yourself with a pinch of salt. But most people are a bit put back by that because they're not expecting it. Now, and then whatever comes out of their mouth, is probably fake. Yeah. Yeah. And then that gives you an indication of how the negotiation is going to go on later, that they're trying to bluff you already, right? So you can expect that that's going to happen. So that's a really good question that I like to ask. What's the highest offer you've rejected to date? And then the other one is, we've talked about this a couple of times, but ask them what the game plan is. Because if you go there and you see the property and then they sell it 24 hours and they didn't include you in it, is why not? Like, did you not put your hand up? Did you not ask them what they were going to do? Because you might say to them, I've got a good interest in this one, and they say, okay, great, well, so does Joe Bloggs. They've just made an offer, and we're already starting that process. So if you want to be included in that, I'll get you a contract this afternoon. Rather than ringing up on Monday and saying, oh, we really like 12 Smith Street. And they're like, yeah, great, well, so did everyone else. We sold it on Sunday night. Yeah, which happens a lot.
I've just got the sun coming in at a ridiculous angle. I don't know if you see me just ducking in and out.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just give me 30 seconds while I change the blinds. But whilst I'm doing that, I guess lots of different go-to-markets with properties. So there's like direct selling with for a direct price, and there's the auction campaigns and things like that. Like, what's your preferred when you're trying to negotiate, discounts? Which is the preferred model that you're preferring them to be selling through you under? Like, do you prefer, the price point, or do you prefer an auction campaign? Like, how does that help you?
When I'm trying to buy, or when I'm guiding?
Yeah, when you're trying to buy.
Yeah, when I'm trying to buy, the ideal scenario is to buy it when it's private treaty, right? Like, so whether it's off market or pre-market. When it goes to that, when they take price out of the equation, and then it's really a lot more guesswork about where the vendor is, and sometimes I'll just play cat and mouse. And in Queensland, for example, as you know, they can't quote a price. So that makes it really difficult for a lot of buyers in that situation as well. So much prefer to buy private treaty. Auction, as we've established, you're going to pay retail if you're buying it on auction day. So we want to avoid that at all costs. But sometimes you can't. Sometimes I just have to go to auction, and then the danger is, as we discussed, getting caught in that situation where you're bidding against yourself at the end, and then that's where you've really got to play a strong game, and basically say to the agent in that situation, and I do this all the time for my clients if I'm bidding on their behalf, is like, well, Christine, you wanted this auction, you've called this public auction, we tried to buy it during the campaign, you wouldn't let us. This is your doing in the nicest possible way. But I'm standing here with my hand up last as the highest bidder. I am market value. So rather than sit here and tell me that I've got to pay more or beat me down, your vendors are just there. Go and have a chat with them. Yeah. And that, if you can play strong there and hold your ground, very often, that leaves us in a position where they'll come back at much closer to where I am, or they'll just accept that offer. It doesn't always work like that. Knowing what the agent's role is, sometimes the vendor is just sky high on price. And that, again, this is another auction session you could spend an hour on, but these are all the reasons why an agent doesn't want your offer in an auction campaign. You'll hear agents all the time say things like, we're committed to sell at auction. vendors want an open and transparent auction rather than bidding behind the scenes with everybody. We've got too many buyers involved. It's just easier and cleaner to go to auction and have that transparent process. There's multiple sellers. It's just cleaner if we do it all on the day. They're all throwaway lines that are protecting their little baby, which is 4 weeks worth of marketing and profile building in the marketplace, which is absolutely key to them owning market share as an agent. And that's why they're telling you they don't want their offers. The other reason is they've overpriced the listing very often to get it with the vendor. They've underquoted to the buyers to get people there. If they give you, as a seller, great offers week 1, all they're doing is setting your expectations really high. It makes their job very, very difficult to get you down to week 4 where they've got that pressure cooker auction. So they're going to tell you a high number, tell the market a low number, tell the buyers they've got every hope to get there. So they build up their war chest of buyers, tell the vendor no good news over 4 weeks. So they set their reserve lower on auction day, put them all under extreme pressure on the day, and hopefully that they sell over reserve. And that's when you get it in the letterbox saying, I'm the difference between a dud agent and a good result.
Yeah. That said, I've seen some recent statistics that say anywhere between 30 and 40% of all auctions are actually settled prior to auction day, I guess, offer prior. So what are some tips with regards to trying to make those offers prior to auction?
Well, the big problem with that stat, and I've seen that as well, and it's really interesting. I was quite shocked in terms of how many properties were selling prior. But the big problem with that is that people are stopping the fight by overpaying. That's why they're selling prior, because someone's just going in with this monster number because out of frustration and sheer buyer depth they're competing against and paying these knockout punches, which is unrealistic. So the difficulty is stopping them without having to overpay. And I guess, that's my whole job, right? That's what I've got to do. So it's about falling back on the things that are really important to understanding market value. So, focusing like a laser focus on 2 or 3 in your instance suburbs, making sure you see every open for inspection, every auction to understand real-time prices and sheer buyer depth. And then when you get to a property that you like, then you know what the numbers are. And I'll run a test with my buyers, and people can do this themselves at home. My buyers don't like when I run this test, and possibly it's hard for you or me, but I do it with myself and my wife every time we've bought. We're up to property 29 now. In terms of transactions we've done, and I still do it with bids and I all the time, is to say, okay, well, we're doing our numbers around 800 grand. So you'll be happy at 800 grand, right? Yep. Okay, cool. Well, what if you could buy it at 810? Would you pay 810? Like the FISO's at 8.
Yeah.
But look, to stop the fight in this market. Yeah, sure. Okay, we'd go to 810. Okay, cool. Well, then your target price is 810. Okay, so we could buy this at 820 this afternoon and no competition, job done at 820. Would you buy it at 820? Oh, it's getting too far away from the FISO. But look, yes, just to get it over and done with, we've been looking for 6 months. It's the right property. It's our dream spot. We know we can make money out of it. Yeah, I'd go to 820. Okay, great. So the target price, it just goes on and on until you hit a wall. And then, so when you go into those negotiations and you're doing it pre-auction, it's easy to say, well, it works for me at 820. Beyond that, I don't care. And then you just walk away. So that's where I get my clients as quickly as possible to know what that number is. And then there's really no regret. I've never had a buyer call me back later and say, geez, I wish I went to 830, because I pushed them so hard at 820 that they're like, nah, beyond that, it just does not work for us. And they appreciate that later. So that's the key to it. I think is to stopping these properties early is to really understand your market and where the value sits for you. And then you can go really hard at that price. And beyond that, it just doesn't work and you walk away. But it's those buyers that aren't doing their research. It's those buyers that are emotional and they're just paying an absolute premium. And the reason why the ones that go to auction are selling for even more than that, like 11.4 to 13% more, is because what I found is in that 4-week period, those emotional buyers have just gone back to wherever they can get capital from, right? And this is why bank of mum and dad is so prevalent right now. They go back to mum and dad and say, all right, I'm going to need another 50 or 100 grand or 200 grand to put myself in this position where I won't lose on that Saturday. And then how do you compete with them? If you're looking for a margin out of it and you're competing with a highly emotional end user, very difficult. So you've got to stop them early.
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to know your numbers. That's really what it comes down to. So
yeah.
Okay, what about the auction itself? So on the day, I guess different ways of breaking that, I guess the rhythm or the cadence of the auction. How do you get cut through when you're bidding on someone's behalf?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've probably got just as good an answer as I have here. My answer is be the last one with your hand up in the deepest pockets. Yeah, I get asked this 3 times a week by different clients. And there really is no rhyme or reason to it. I've done so. I used to work at Ray White head office, and I used to set up the auction room where they do 15 or 20 of these every couple of days. And then I've been an auction agent for 20 years, where sometimes I do 6, 8 of them on a Saturday myself with our team. I've just done thousands of them over the years, and really, it's very difficult to see a theme that really works when you know what the reserve price is and you're watching the market, you're watching body language and the rest of it. The only thing I do is because I just hate, I don't want to keep swearing, so I hate fucking around on, I'm busy, everyone's busy.
It's my show,
and
mate. You can swear. It's all good.
Okay, cool. I'm brutal, right? I'm brutal with numbers. I'm like, it works for me at this number or my client. Beyond that, I couldn't give a shit. Let's just get there as soon as possible and just jog on. And I don't mean I don't care about my clients. I just don't care about the agent's 30-minute spiel about how close it is to KFC and the airport. So I will go in and I'll know where the parameters are for us, and I'll start at a number just really fast. So often I'll just open the bidding, because I know that my clients are highly emotional. So the faster you get through the auction in some regards, the better. And then when anyone bids, if it's within our parameters still, I just smash them with, like, typically it's 20 grand, so it depends on what you're buying, what price it is, but typically I'll hit back with 20 grand straight after they try to slow it down. And the faster you go, you're just hoping that they think this guy's got, endless vast reserves of cash. Yep. And they get to a point where they go, okay, well, this is our limit, and we know this guy's just going to keep putting 20 on top. So, and then you're hoping that you just beat them by, you maybe save 20 grand. That's kind of, and that's a lot. If you can save 20 grand at $1 million or $2 million, that's a win, right? It's 20 grand that you don't have to go out and work for. So, but that type of strategy is the only thing I've found over the years that really works. Yeah. What about you?
I think it's really about reading the room, and like you said, every auction is actually completely different. I personally, as a developer, I have a fundamental hatred of auctions. Like, I can't stress the word hatred hard enough, because as a developer, selling unconditional means that I'm taking a risk. I have to factor in risk into my price. It also means I have to factor in my cash flow. And so there are many, many times I would pay much more for a property outside of auction conditions, and trying to get that message through an agent is just ridiculous, because risk is worth something to me. The ability to take it to council and get my pre-lodgement advice and do due diligence, that's worth something to me. Whereas if I have to buy unconditional, I have to factor that in. So I don't want to engage in the auction process. It's just a principle that I live by. I'll
Makes
offer
sense
before,
for the type of assets that you're buying.
Yeah, I'll offer before and I'll offer after. And like you touched on before, I guess the best part is after, because at that point, you push back their words onto them and say, well, that's what the market has said. So this is where it really sits.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I did a deal about 2 weeks ago at 16 mil, and they had substantially higher offers than that were all conditional. They all had sort of 4-week DD clauses or 3-month DD clauses, and they ended up selling it for effectively $2 million less to an unconditional client. So yeah, I'm used to dealing with that. I agree. Auctions doesn't work really well for a buyer in that situation. So you can only do what you can do. And it depends what you're buying as well. Like, if you're buying if you're buying a house where someone wants to build their dream home, but you want to build 2 villas, it's really difficult to compete against those end users that are buying a location. They're buying the block of dirt where they want to be buried in. So it's really hard. It's horses for courses, isn't it? Depends on what asset you're buying. But I haven't found really there's a winner take all strategy in terms of auction bidding, other than have the deepest pockets and you end up last.
No, you did touch on something that kind of left an open loop, so I might come back and close that. You said how to not get caught bidding against yourself in the auction process.
Yeah, well, because you're going to end up with this gap, this is going to happen in the next few months. It's already happening to a certain degree, and it definitely happens every weekend, but it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger of a problem, is that a vendor's expectations are X, the market's at Y, and the agent wants to bring it together under that pressure cooker. So they'll put you under the blowtorch as the highest bidder by saying things like, if you don't pay it, we've got 2 people that were conditional that couldn't be bidding today, they'll be ready on Monday, all the other bullshit that comes out of their mouth. And they'll be going back to the owner to say, this is your opportunity to sell under hammer as well, but we want to get you the best possible price. So they'll keep fighting back and forth, but really they're trying to push the buyer. And very often I'll sit there at an auction and I'll watch when we're losing, when I'm out, and watch a buyer pay substantially more against themselves when everyone else is standing there watching. No one else is bidding. They were already the top bidder. Everyone else was exhausted, but yet they'll still pay 20, 50, 100, 150 grand more than they have to, because the agent's doing his job, trying to get an emotional premium out of them. And they just want to end the fight, right? Like they just want to, they've got so far, and the agent plays on that. They know that. They're like, you'll be back looking, you've been with me for 6 months, don't let this one go, you've been here since day one, blah, 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 blah. They just play on all those things, and that's when you end up spending money against yourself. So you've got to play hardball there to try and put yourself in those shoes, and in the control shoes, and make sure that the agent goes and works hard. But I mean, I don't know if you've got much time to kind of workshop this, but I'll give you a really quick role play of what I used to do.
Yeah, go for
Not
it.
necessarily role play, but as an agent, when that happens, so the auction would happen, I use Damien Cooley, which is one of the, he's one of the top auctioneers in Australia. And I would say to Damo all the time for my auctions, don't call the property on the market. Let me exhaust all the bidders, like drain it out as hard as you can. And even if we've smashed reserve by 500 grand, don't call it on the market. And I'd get to that highest bidder after he'd done that, and everything would stop. And let's say we're at 1.5 million in reserve. Well, let's say we're at 1.6 million and reserve was at 1.5. I would go up to you, Rob, and say, Rob, look, thanks for your bidding. You've done so well here today. You've been with us right from day one. I really want to make this happen for you. We're not there yet. We're really close to getting the property called on the market. I'm going to go and talk to the vendor, see if I can get them down a little bit. I'm going to work hard for you to try and get this job done under hammer. It's obviously your best, opportunities now before we've got other competition during the week, as we discussed, that, that really want to buy the house. I'm going to get this happening for you, Rob, but just give me a moment and I'm just going to go inside. And I'd go inside and the owners would be ecstatic. They're 100 grand over reserve. They're absolutely selling. They'd be like, why haven't you called the hammer? Why isn't it sold? Like, oh, just give me a second. And I'd pull out my business card and I'd say, look, let me have a quick sip of champagne, but let me just go and work a little bit harder and see if I can get some more money for you. So I'd go back out with my business card out of my pocket and I'd write 1.7. I'd say, Rob, look, they were at 1.8. This is the amended reserve. We're at 1.7. Will you pay 1.7? And you go, oh, look, no, can't. We're at 1.6. Well, you need to pay 1.7, Rob. Otherwise, I'm going to go to buy number 2, buy number 3. Can you pay 1.7? No. Okay. What will you pay?
Yeah.
What will you pay, Rob? And the whole room's silent, right? Everyone is watching you, and you might go, I'll go to 165. Okay, well, I'll do my best to get 165. Just give me a second. I go back into the owner and say, okay, great, got another 50 grand for you. I come back out and go, okay, cross out 1.7. I've got them down to 1.685. Will you pay 1.685, Rob?
Yeah.
No, we wouldn't. Okay, I'm just going to go talk to bidder number 2, Rob. I'll be back with you in just a second. I'd go around the room. I come back. Rob, what was your decision? Will you pay 1.685? No, okay. What can you pay? Oh, we'll go another 10. Okay, let me talk to the owner. And I just go back and forth, and all of a sudden, you've just paid $70,000 more than you needed to. No one else is a part of this except for you and me playing this game. And, I just worked you up in front of everybody to that level. So it is all very well choreographed. Good auction agents will work their ass off to get the best possible price. And the reason why they don't want your pre-auction offer at an early stage is because they don't want to sell a secret, right? You don't want to be in the office selling it to Rob and your boss is watching, when you could do it in 4 weeks' time on a Saturday with 150 neighbors watching, and everyone watching you do this amazing choreographed event where you've just worked a buyer up $70,000. So guess what's going to happen? The neighbors are going to ring me and say, Scott, you did such a great job. I watch you, get that idiot to pay 75 grand more than they had to. It's like, great, I'll come around and sign your house up and I'll do the same for you. So that's how it works. That's why they don't want your offers, right? They've got to get it to under hammer, and that's why you can't bid against yourself. You've got to stay strong in that last hurdle.
Yeah, very good.
Did that close the loop?
That did close the loop very well, mate. We're about to go and grab some questions from the audience in a sec, so might make this the last one from me before we go grab that something from them. When you're trying to determine, I guess, fair market price, when you're I guess, making an offer on behalf of one of your clients, how do you determine what that fair market price is for the property?
Well, I'll do my own research to look at comparable sales, both what's on the market and what's recently sold. But I think the number one trick, if you're looking in the sold section, is to not focus your energy there. Focus your energy in the current listing section with the properties that are under offer already, because they're the transactions that happened yesterday or a week ago. If you ring those agents, and you just tell them, look, I'm interested in buying another property that's similar to this one. Can you tell me what that sold for? Sometimes they can't, but they'll tell you a range. They'll say to you, look, it sold between 880 and 900. You do the maths. You know, it sold for 890 basically. Or they'll tell you what the number is specifically because it's not, you know, confidential. So if you can focus on finding those most up-to-date listings, that's a little gold nugget that will help you a lot in terms of what people are paying. But I'll fall back on saying to the clients, or if it's me doing it, for example, I'll be, well, what's happened in the last 4 weeks or 3 weeks? Like, you know, at the auctions that I've gone and watched, did that top bidder get pushed by 3 or 4 people, or were they one of the, you know, dunces that bid against themselves and everyone else was actually 75 grand below them and they've gone, they're out of the market now, they've bought a property. So I'll get a fair sense of where it needs to be. And then I said earlier that I'd make an offer as close as I can to that real number because I know where I'm comfortable and where it works, and beyond that, we let it go.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you for that, mate. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the audience to see if we've got any questions. Just got your contact details on screen for anyone who is wanting to know how to reach out to Scott. Lots of people saying hi there. So hi to Luke, Lynn, Chris, Jeff, and a whole bunch more. Luke Moroney is just saying bye, mate. Luke loves buying stuff all the time. So a lot of people just saying hi, but let's see if I can actually find a question. Jeff Miles saying 2 awesome gents having a cracking chat. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that, mate.
Thanks, Jeff.
Daniel saying, first time I've ever heard of Scott speak. What an absolute real estate guru. Love your work, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Well, so thank you, Daniel. So although he did say love Scott and then said gentlemen, I don't know where I count in that particular scenario. So, Joe, finally someone that has lifted the lid on the crazy stuff that agents do. Thank you, mate. So I guess Joe and Jeff run their own networking group. So hi to those gents. Seeing what other, I don't think we've got any questions. It's more statements, mate. I think we've bamboozled them. So what are okay, here's one from Joe. What are some of the key things that agents say that are indicators of bullshit?
Well, I'm waiting in every single negotiation for an agent to tell me that there's another buyer. So that is the standard industry practice when you're training a junior real estate agent, that you introduce competition into the mix. Good agents will do it very cleverly, and they'll do it at different stages. They won't just do it when you call up to make an offer. Oh, by the way, there's someone else. You know, they'll plant that seed early and make you work hard for it. But most agents, I'd say, well, not most, but a lot of agents will just bring that into the mix straight away. And it's all about understanding when they brought it into the conversation, when they introduced it, for me to see how much my BS radar goes off. So I'll know very often that they're bluffing when I call them, you know, on their BS because they say it at a certain point. So I guess you just got to understand that. The other thing is, another really tricky one that most people probably wouldn't pick up on is that an agent will say to you, look, we've already got an offer of 690. So like today, for example, I'll use that example. So she said that there was 2 other offers that were really close to that kind of 690 mark, which is where I offered. But most buyers would just take that as gospel. Okay, well, I've got to beat 690. But the question that I asked at that point is, well, are, you know, all things equal? Are they waiving the finance clause, or are they conditional on finance? Because that's crucial, right? That's like, it's not worth the toilet paper it's written on versus here it is that you can take it to the bank right now. So agents won't tell you that. They'll just tell you, oh yeah, we've got other people that want to pay 690. You've got to be north of that. But they're 690 horrible offers, and you know, are they even true anyway? So you've got to dig into that. And the way to dig into that often is for me to say, and this will kind of, this I guess flushes out their BS. I will say to them, I've got a buyer that's like, so today I said it to her. I'll repeat what I said, the script. So the first phone call, I've got a buyer, she's in that, no, so I asked first, what will buy it? She said 700 grand. Okay, I said, okay, well, I've got a buyer that's in the 650 to 675 range. Am I wasting my time? She goes, yep, because we've got these other offers there. So immediately, right, I've thrown out some numbers that are irrelevant, but I want to know if she's going to let me go at 675 or not. And she did, because she said straight away, no, we've got 2 other people that have just made offers that are at this level. So that means for me, that's real. You know, and I might be wrong, but generally speaking, that's real. But if you throw that number out there and you don't get the same answer, you can kind of read through the bluff. It's hard to explain. I'm probably not doing a very good job of explaining it.
No, you're doing a great job, mate.
I will throw out bait and see if they take it, or if they kind of, what answer they give me. And that kind of gives me the next hint of where I go. And I'll kind of threaten to take the buyer away, not in an aggressive manner, but I'll say, look, they're only at this level. And then if they jump at me and chase at me, then I know that they will probably sell at that level. If they don't, and they're really cold and calculated that, no, that's not going to buy it, blah, 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 then I know that, okay, well, hang on, I've got to go harder at it than where I positioned it. So I guess it's just, I said that you could do the same when you're trying to find out an agent's guide price. And it's the same when you offer. You can talk about, you've been looking, or you've been making offers at a lower range, and, and see what their response is. Just listen. They might say, well, you got no chance of buying at that level. Or, well, give us an offer. And if it give us an offer, that's like, the door's open a little bit. Let's just go down that. And maybe I'll go at 661, and just see, how motivated they are. And they might come back at 680, and then it's a negotiation, you know what I mean? Rather than going in at 690 or 675 to start with. So you just got to kind of suck it and see as you go. And each negotiation is vastly different.
You touched on one, which is one that you hear from time to time. It's go in with an odd number offer. Do you find that effective at all, or?
Yeah, I use that quite a lot because everyone negotiates in block numbers. So if you're going to do a sealed bids, I always end up on an odd number for that reason. But even when you're negotiating just one-on-one with an agent, then often that kind of slows things down a little bit, that you pitch it at a certain level. Because I'll give you another example. When I negotiated on the house in Wallara that we bought for 6.95 million last month, we start at a certain level, and the owners just want to go in blocks of like 500 grand, or 250 grand or 100 grand. But, I deliberately slowed it down. It was 6.72. They came back at 7. It was 6.835 or something like that. It's like I've thought about this, and we don't see value above that level. And I'm trying to get them to move off 7 million. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 7 million. It can be 2, 3, 4 million, depends on what you're buying. But what I found as well is that it's really quite easy at the end of a negotiation, when you're talking about big deals like that, to win 50 grand or 75 grand. Because you go, if you get pushed to go all the way to a number like that, in that instance, they'll like 7, 7, 7, 7. We don't care. It's 7. Yeah. It's, it's unencumbered. It's 7 million. We own tons of property. We couldn't care less. You pay 7 or jog on. So I went in steps, got to 6.95, and they said, nuts, 7. I said, well, look, unfortunately, my buyers just said they're never, ever, ever paying $7 million for that house. So, let's be adults about it. It's 50 grand. Let's just get on with it. Get it done at 6.95. He rings his owner. Yeah, fine, we'll take it. But that's 50 grand, right? Like I know they don't care. It's 7 million. They've got plenty of money, but it's still 50 grand. And it's easy to win little, have little wins like that. And you've got to think about how much money that is. If you just had 50,000 bucks lying in cash on your dining table, it's worth fighting for, right? But people just go in block numbers. So if you can, break it up a little bit, and I think that can sometimes be your friend, just to show the owner that you've given some thought about it. But you just can't use that word that I said to you before, budget. Don't say, I've gone to, 682,000 because that's all the bank will lend me, because that's the wrong way of looking at it. Because if I was a vendor in that situation, they're going to say to the agent, look, thank Rob for his offer. Sounds like a top guy, but he can't afford my beautiful house. Yeah. He needs to go back and find another bank. Yeah. Versus if you give them an offer of 682 and say, Rob loves your house, he's got a budget of 800 grand. He just doesn't see value beyond 682, and it's because of this, and this. The agent's going to convey that conversation word for word with the vendor, and then the vendor's got to make a decision. Well, Rob's made an offer based on value and based on where else he thinks this property sits in the pecking order of other things that are on the market. It's a very different conversation rather than budget.
Absolutely. Another question from Jordan. So Jordan talking about an instance where he's sending letters direct to a vendor. Vendor has responded to a letter in their letterbox, and they'll pick up the phone and give him a call, and then they say they're not in a hurry. So what do you do where a vendor's actually reached out and goes, well, I'm happy to engage in the fact that you want to buy, but I'm not in a hurry to sell?
Ask questions. That would be the first thing I'd say is, great. Well, I'm glad you put your hand up that you're interested in selling. I'm interested in buying your house or your land or whatever it might be. How could we make it a mutually, agreeable situation here? What's going to work for you? And dig into it with them and say, okay, well, if it's not now, how could it work differently for you? And really what you want to try and do is get them now but on maybe a really long settlement, or a, whatever those terms might be. And those ones are actually an opportunity where you can find something that's favorable for you as well, because you might be able to lock someone in today and not pay for it for 12 months or 9 months, or subject to due diligence or whatever, which gives them the time that they need to get their ducks lined up. I've gone to the hassle of helping a buyer, a house that I wanted to buy, going to the hassle of helping them buy their next property, like doing all the legwork for them to get them out of their property and into something else that they're happy with. So I guess it depends how hungry you are for the opportunity. But I think asking questions about what are the roadblocks, and then how can you repackage it up? Oh, great. Okay, cool. You can't sell for 12 months because your son's finishing his HSC this year. Yep, that makes sense. You're not going to sell till next year. Okay, well, hang on. The market's moving 27% a year. What about if we made you, an offer with a long settlement, flexible terms? You could leave with 3 months notice at the end. You could leave at any time if you want to. If you change your mind, find the right property, you could go with a month's notice. Think outside the box. And I think if you ask lots of questions, you can build a strategy that you can feed back to them and take away all those roadblocks.
Yeah, I'd add to that. And in Jordan's instance, he's looking for a development capable site. You can easily say, well, I can add value to that property during the process through the development approval. You're saving on holding costs. Your ability to pay a little bit more, Jordan, is higher, and I'd be giving a bit of feedback to the vendor saying, well, I can pay a little bit more because you've given me that time, right? And then do the flexible settlement.
Yeah.
So.
Sounds good. So if you've done your market research and you know what it's worth, it's easy to quantify how much you're going to pay them as a premium, and you can explain to them all of your maths and say, well, this is the market and I'm prepared to go to X, which is going to make it a better deal than you'll get if you sell it on the open market to someone else.
Yeah. So got a question here from Renfax. So Renfax says, I signed a contract but haven't heard from the agent for 6 days with no counter offer. What would I do? Should I follow up with the agent or just or go to the
next?
That's
a prime example of what we discussed before about not knowing what the goalposts are, right? Knowing what the game is that you're playing. So I'd absolutely be all over that agent like a hawk. And it doesn't mean that you're desperate to buy the property. You just desperately want an answer because you're busy and you're looking at other properties. So you've got to introduce the competition to some degree and say, look, this offer is not just going to stay here. I've got other properties I'm looking at. There's other opportunities. If you're not willing to take this, see ya, we're gone. So, and that'll do one of two things. A, engage them and they are willing to negotiate with you and you're possibly going to put more money on the table, or you'll get an answer, which is the likelihood if they haven't called you for 6 days, that, mate, you're nowhere near the price. We've got 10 other people paying that are prepared to pay more, but you just want to know that quickly. So that goes back to my SMS point. What's the point of me putting an offer on contract if I'm not going to hear from you for 6 days of that number? Yeah. I want to know that my number is there or thereabouts. And if it's not, I'll jog on. There's plenty of other opportunities.
Yeah, very good. Question from Andy. So firstly, he says absolute gold, so thank you much. Now he says, can I ask, how would you approach a scenario where you've been dealing directly with the vendor, I guess, for an off-market sale, and then midway through the process, they then decide to take it through to an agent? What would be your approach there?
So I think two things have happened potentially. One is you've either tried to ride roughshod over them, or they didn't feel comfortable with the communication. So if you haven't got them wrapped up and feeling good, then why would they need to outsource it to someone else? Possibly you haven't done a good enough job in terms of wrapping them up in cotton wool and thinking that you're the only person they need to talk to. So that's one thing. Maybe it's the approach and the communication. It's key to it. And if they're going to market, then I could only imagine that the agents are in their ears saying, well, you got this guy offering 1.2 million and we can get you 1.4. So, have you offered enough? And that goes back to my point of you've possibly tried to bottom feed it and buy it at a level that worked for you, but it didn't quite work for the vendor. And that's cost you because now they're going to introduce competition to you and it's going to sell for market value. So you've got to be smarter about that and say, okay, well, rather than try and ping this absolute bargain that was never going to happen, if you gave them 20 or 50 or 100 grand more in that situation, that still would have worked in your fees out really well, you would have landed the property below market value and you'd have that, as your next project rather than someone else. So I don't know, I would say possibly the numbers, but also possibly a communication thing. I've seen that happen a lot over the years as well. And you're dealing with owners that are obviously, it's human nature to be just, if you get fed this, over promise that your property's might be worth 1.2, 1.3 in your fees, but you've got agents telling them it's worth 1.5. It falls back to what we said before. They're going to go in and over quote and then under quote to the buyers. So maybe that's something that you need to say to these potential private sellers up front, is that I'm going to offer you a great price. Here's the reasons why. You're possibly going to speak to agents, or you've possibly spoken to agents. They're going to tell you a grossly overinflated price, but this is what happens. And talk them through that case study and say, they're going to quote you X, they're going to quote to buyers Y, and they're going to beat you down until you take market value. So do you feel like spending $6,000 or $10,000 on marketing or whatever it might be, and to have that stress in your life? Or would you rather fall back on what the buyers are going to look at, which is the real value of it, based on comparable sales and what other opportunities in the marketplace? And here I am now with no agents fees, no marketing costs, no stress, and I'm right in front of you. Do you want to take it or not?
Yeah, and sticker price versus cash in your pocket, two different things.
Yeah. I like
Greg's
that one.
got a question. Sorry, I missed that, mate.
Go for it. I said I like that. Sticker price versus cash in your pocket. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. So Greg says, how do you put pressure on the agent or seller in order to respond to you rather than having protracted negotiations?
Leverage. Yeah. So you've got to put it into a conversation that you're working within a set time frame. You've got other opportunities. There's lots going on in your life. You're going to make a really compelling offer. It's not going to be here forever. You don't say it in an aggressive manner, as I said before. You give them reasons why. You're already talking to lots of other people, and you should be. You should be talking to. If you're in a marketplace, there should be opportunities, right? I'll give you an example. I bought the development site at Nobby's Beach 2 months ago. I had 4 properties, 4 development sites off market, privately talking to me at once. And I had the choice of all 4. So I made offers on 4 of them in one go in 1 week, and 2 of them were no, and I was still in negotiations, and 2 of them were going to come back as yes, and I chose the one that I wanted to buy. So I can generate this. I'm not doing that all day in terms of a buyer. I'm busy with Hello Haus and doing my own stuff. But if you're watching a market, because I just watch it like a hawk, I know the agents that get those listings, I stay in their pocket, they're all on speed dial. And when I'm ready to buy again and I've got finance, I ring them and say, this is what I want, and I'm ready to go. And I tell them, I'm talking to you, but I'm also talking to, all your competitors, and everyone knows me. I don't mean that in an ego way, but everyone knows when I'm in the market, I'm going to buy, right? I'm going to pull the trigger and buy something. And that agent that services me is probably going to get my listing because they're doing the heavy lifting, right? For me, they're finding me sites. So it's going to guarantee you multiple sales. You need to work, with me as well. So if you can introduce leverage to them and say, I'm going to make an offer, but there's other options on the table for us, and we get in, we're going to make a best and final, and we go. And if you do this in one market and you trade there long enough, agents will know how you do business. If you go about yourself in a different way and you say, oh, this is it, best and final, and then 20 minutes later you give them another 50 or another 100, they're just going to know that every time they say no, you're going to put more money on the table. And that if they drag you out for 5 days and introduce competition, you're not going to do anything about it. So you have to stand up for yourself at some point, and you've got to do it on your terms. And your terms sometimes is going to mean missing out. I miss out on lots of properties, but I make it my business to see normally 50 plus properties before I pull the trigger and buy. That's just what I've done over my whole career, because I want to know the market inside out, and I know that I can't land all of them, right? Like if I've got 4 of them in one go, which was a fantastic result 2 months ago in a flat out, Queensland market. But of those 4, they all suit the parameters that I need, but I know there's going to be one standout there that's just going to be a better square meter rate, a better profit margin for me, and it's just going to be a better site and a better location. And it's going to, so you've got to be playing a numbers game, right? 3 of them are going to fall away and that one's going to stand up. Or what's going to happen is out of those 4, it's going to be one vendor that's off market that's more motivated than the others, or doesn't have a clue what they're doing, or the agent that's introduced them just wants to get the property sold quickly. So you've got to, it's a numbers game. And if you do that, then I think you'll have less of this, well, the agent didn't call me back, or I've got no control over the agent. So I think you just kind of got to take the bull by the horns a bit.
Yeah, very good. Next question from Lisa. If you have to add a finance clause to your offer, how else can you make the rest of the offer look attractive?
Well, get rid of all the other speed humps. So match the settlement the owner wants, the deposit the owner wants. Make sure there's no other major clauses in the contract, like the deposit's the same amount that they need. If you have to have a finance clause, but you've asked questions about the owner needs to move on, possibly, a lot with the development stuff that I deal with, it's a little old lady or a rundown house, they haven't got much money, that I offer to release the deposit. And if I have to have a finance clause, I say, yeah, okay, well, everyone has to have a finance clause, but I'm prepared to give you 10% to go out and buy your next property so you can get on with your life plans. A lot of people will take that because they're like, well, hang on, that can free me up now and I can go and do my thing. So it's about being creative, really, giving them everything they want, get rid of the speed humps in the rest of the contract, and then any other way that you can sweeten the deal that doesn't necessarily cost you any money. I know there's an element of risk in terms of releasing the deposit. I should put a disclaimer there. Every solicitor will say to you, or second guess why you're doing that, but you have to be commercial about it as well. It's the same with the finance clause. If we touch on this really quickly, in Southeast Queensland at the moment, it's near impossible to buy a residential property without waiving the finance clause. Okay, I'm dealing with this all day, every week, and every time I've got a client that can't move the finance clause, they lose, even if they're pretty much the top offer. So there's just enough buyers out there that are cash or that don't need a conditional finance clause that they can sell it without it. So I keep asking all the brokers that refer clients to me, what's the risk? I haven't seen a client in 2021 get a property downvalued. Not one of my clients or any news of anyone in my network has told me a property has been downvalued that they purchased. I bought a shithole in Mermaid Waters, like a complete knockdown on 1,351 square meters, paid $2 million for it and set a Mermaid Waters dry block record. Okay. So anyone looking at that would go, Jesus, that's huge money. But when you look at what I was doing, I knew I could get subdivision. I got subdivision in 7 days between exchange and settlement. And I bought it probably 50% less than what it was worth. So I thought the valuers are just going to look at this as a shitbox house and they'll absolutely slate it and it'll be down valued to like 1.6. It didn't. It valued up at $2 million on the nose. Okay. And I had my house, which we were selling. We did another little project, which we just sold at auction last Saturday. 2 months ago, or a month and a half before I took it to auction, the bank valued it at 825. I sold it on Saturday for $1.05 million under hammer. So they're being really hard on the refis, really easy on the purchase. So my question to loop this back is, do you really need a finance clause at the moment? Like every broker is saying you can't buy without one, but it's like, well, what are the risks? And you have to work that out depending on what equity you've got and whether you're in a really good position. That if it does get downvalued, can you go to a second tier lender? You might pay. I was moving cash around. I had lots going on. I paid 3.4% when I probably could have got it for 1.9% somewhere else. But it suited me to go down that way in terms of dealing with a different lender that allowed me to keep more of my portfolio and buy again. So you just have to look at what all your answers are and the things that you've got available to you to see if you can workshop different ways to make it sweeter or easier or take the risk.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do also with whether or not you can force value onto it and whether or not the cost of that, I guess, as a cost of the transaction, whether or not that's impacting the feasibility in any way, shape or form. If it's a long-term buy and hold, I understand that could be challenging if you don't get the finance clause across the line because you won't be able to fund it. But as a development site, you should be able to get alternative funding in there, incrementally change your fees over, but still make it a cracking deal.
Yeah, and I've gone to talk about banker mum and dad. I'm lucky with a few mates that from time to time, and I know this isn't going to be applicable to everyone, but I will go cap in hand to friends and say, listen, I need 200 grand for a month or 3 months, whatever, and I'll give you 10% on your money or whatever it might be. And I've done the same for mates as well. So, I mean, is there people in your network, your friends, family? I know that, again, I know that's possibly a privileged thing to say, and I don't mean that in a gross way, but what I'm trying to say is I'll draw on whatever I possibly can to get myself into a position to the next deal. If I know that's going to make me money, but I have to give a little bit of fat away to somebody else because of that luxury of being able to get into that deal, I will. Yeah. I'm commercial about it. If it costs me another 50 grand to give a mate 50 grand to borrow that cash, I will. And they're sitting, like so many people are sitting in these huge equity positions on properties that aren't doing anything. Like some of my mates are, just been sitting on one house they bought for 20 years or whatever, and they don't have any plans to go and develop or do anything else. They've got this whopping amount of cash that they can access on the line of credit and nothing to do with it. So it's like, oh, well, I'll give you 10% on your money in 3 months. They're like, done. I'll draw down and do it. So, yeah.
There's a bucket load of paper-based millionaires out there, just don't know how to use it.
Totally. Yeah.
Now, this question I think we've kind of covered, but I'll go through it anyway. Krishna says, what sort of increments can you go up, I guess, when increasing your offer, if it's a private treaty or off market? When you're trying to jump up your increments, what do you tend to do?
Yep. Well, we touched on this, that I go 95 to 97% of the way with my first offer, because the problem with going at 90% or somewhere between the two is that you're going to end up having to bid against yourself. The more times that they say no and you keep coming back with more money, they're more inclined to keep saying no, and you've got to pay more. So, and then that shows how desperate you are. You can't use the leverage part if you just keep bidding. So you don't want to be doing that, and you don't want to be doing small increments against yourself either. So you're better off to go harder at it up front. And then if you have to move, you go to the number that they're saying you've got to pay, or very close to it, whatever, and try and do it. So really, to answer that question, a 1 or 2 stop offer process is the ideal scenario. So I wouldn't get caught doing small increments against yourself.
Very good. Now we've got lots more comments, but I think I'll take this as the last question. So Jan says, how do you deal with a vendor who is totally unrealistic?
Jog on.
Jog on.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to frame that, I'm going to say.
Yeah. Look, the circumstances can be, without knowing what the circumstances are in each of these deals, it's hard to answer that one. But look, again, this is a numbers game, right? That we just discussed, that you're going to get vendors that just aren't realistic. And unfortunately, you just can't slap sense into some of these people. They've just got unrealistic expectations. A lot of it is just due to seeing nothing but good news in the media, or agents blowing sunshine up them that they could get them some unrealistic price that they're never going to get just to win the listing. So sometimes you're just going to have to walk away and say, do you know what? I love this deal. We're desperate to own this property, but it ain't going to happen. That's not going to happen. And you just have to move on and find someone else that's more motivated to sell. Yeah.
Very good. Well,
it's the honest truth. There's no way to sugarcoat that, really. Like we've all had this. If you're in the game long enough, you'll find there's so many unrealistic people that you just look at it and go, there's just no way you're ever going to get that property sold at that price. You should definitely hold it for another 35 years.
Yep. And I'd probably add one thing to that, which would be, here's my business card. Feel free to give me a call if I guess when you are actually ready to meet the market, and just leave it at that. Yep. That said, mate, been a fantastic session. So thank you very much. Have got your contact details in the little link below. So if anyone wants to reach out to Scott at Hello Haus, it's hellohaus.co. Mate, been an absolute privilege, and can't wait to catch up again some point in the future.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat tonight. Thanks so much. Have a good weekend.
No worries.
What's left of it.
Thanks, Scott. See you, mate.
See you later.